This is my Grizzly 660 project, and I'm not a true mechanic. I'm just a shades tree mechanic. So what I'm doing may not be the official way to do it, but it's just the way I do it. Today we're working on a Grizzly 660, and I'm going to be showing y'all how to change a belt. And first thing you want to do is, of course, remove your seat. Remove this plastic piece that's on the opposite side. Snaps off. I've got some of this pre-removed because I've already started on it, and it's a project four-wheeler. So you'll remove your seat, you'll remove this tank plastic here, and basically there's two 10mm bolts here on the tank, and I've already removed those. But that way you can maneuver the tank around and get this piece off. You'll remove your gas cap, and then you should be able, on different ones, there's grommets up here or screws under this piece of plastic here. You might have to remove those. Mine were already removed. And you just take that off. And then this piece here, you're actually supposed to take off before you take that. And it's just got a little piece that goes in there. You remove that, and there's no screws or anything, it's just a piece of plastic. And then what you'll want to do is remove this floorboard here. Some have Allen heads on the bolts, some have Phillips. What you'll do is you'll just get a angle Phillips like that, or a Phillips bit with an angle screwdriver. You'll put it right there. I've already taken these bolts off, and you'll just take an 8mm. I use a gear wrench, 8mm gear wrench, put it on the back, and then just pull them off. And then your floorboard should come off. And there's also, I think there are 10mm screws or bolts right here and right here that go here. You'll want to take those off too. Sometimes they will break off depending on how rusty it is. You'll set that to the side. And then you'll want to remove, there's bolts here. I've already removed those, most of them. But there's one here, one here, one here, one right here. And you might have to use a wrench to get that off. There's another one right here, right down here, right here, right here, right here, right here, and right there. That's on the outside. You'll also have two 10mm bolts here you'll want to take off. Sometimes those do break off as well. So you want to kind of be real careful, and you might want to soak them in some liquid wrench or WD-40. And then once you get that off, get all your screws off. Your belt face, you may have to pull this brake lever down. Your belt face should come off, and you may have to pick up on your plastic just a little bit. Be careful not to break it. Set that to the side. And then you will have 4 10mm bolts back here, and up under here you'll have one here, one here, one up under here, and one here, and that holds this cage on. Once you get those off, you'll slide this cage off like that. And then there's several ways to do this. Some people like to just cut this belt and work the new one on. You can do that. Or you can pull this clutch off, and you don't have to have a puller to do it. You want to remove this nut here. It is a 22mm, and you'll want to use a deep well 22mm, because as you can see, a regular one will not fit. So you'll just impact that off, and it goes counterclockwise. and I've already pre-loosened that, so it wasn't that hard to get off, but you may have to impact it a little bit harder. And also remember, do not use PB Blaster on here, because if all that gets thrown on the belt, it could mess your belt up. So you want to pull this clutch off. And you also have a washer here. You want to be sure not to lose that. You pull that off. That is your primary clutch. And you'll pull this spacer out too. Then you'll take, and you have to kind of work the belt off of the secondary clutch. Just like that. Alright, you want your words on your belt facing towards you. Basically, you'll put your spacer back on, and you'll put your belt back on, and you'll kind of work it on there. And sometimes it is a little hard to work it on there, especially with a new belt. Be sure everything's secure and your belt is lined up and not off the track at all. Alright, now you're ready to put your clutch back on. This piece, just make sure it slides on there pretty good. You'll take your washer, make sure there's no dirt on it. Take your washer, put that on there. Take your nut, put that on there, and just kind of hand tighten it as much as you can. And then you'll want to re-impact that back down. That. There you go. And then you'll also want to kind of move your belt around, make sure it gets set in there pretty good. Just make sure everything's back on track. Make sure there's nothing off. Just kind of feel around. Then you'll put your cage back on. And your cage also has a bearing inside of here. Be sure to check that and make sure it's still good. There's a screw here, a bolt here. I think it's 8 millimeter. Next, you want to put your 10 millimeter bolts back in, the 4 that you took out for this cage here. I've got just some extensions on a regular socket that I do it with, and I just turn it by hand and then just kind of tighten it. Also, be sure not to tighten these too much because you can break them. Just make sure they're snug. Next, you want to put your cover back on, and you'll have to press this brake down sometimes to get it to work in there. And you want to pull your plastic back just real lightly. Make sure it's set in there. You also have a gasket that goes around here. Make sure that's not messed up and everything's straight on it. Alright, and then next you're going to put all your screws back in, all around the outside of it. And also, don't forget your screws right here. These are your shorter screws that you took out earlier. You want to put those back in there. Also be sure not to over tighten these because they will break. These back here are a little tricky to get to, like I said before. Kind of just have to work your hand and kind of just tighten them with your hand. And if you have to, you can use a wrench. A gear wrench won't really fit there, but just take your time with it and just kind of turn it slowly with the wrench if you can't get to it with a socket. Next, you want to put your floorboard back, and you kind of have to maneuver it under this brake pedal here to get it put back in place. And then you put your bolts here, and if you happen to have broken your bolts, you can go to Harbor Freight or Tractor Supply and get you just a nut and a bolt kit and just put your bolts in there. And it's actually easier if you get the nuts and the bolts on there instead of the Phillips head ones, because Phillips heads always break. Also, don't forget your 4 bolts here. If you happen to break them off, I broke 2 of them off. You can also drill those out and just use a nut and a bolt on them too. They're 1, 2, 3, 4 there. And I'm gonna have to drill these 2 out, but these 2 are actually okay. Next, you want to take your tank plastic and put it back on. Make sure it snaps back in there. Make sure everything's all right there. Put your lid back on. And then you'll want to put this guard here back on. Just snaps into place same way you took it off. And I don't have many screws in this yet, but it will snap on something like that. Back on, same way you took it off. And I don't have my stuff on there all the way, but it'll go on there pretty much like that. Then next, you want to put your seat back on, and then you're done. If y'all like the video, please like and subscribe.